So I've done 1,000 kilometers on this bike, and all I needed doing, aside from a basic oil and filter change, was needing the engine valves adjusted. But aside from that, everything on this bike is still working as intended. I will concede, prior to the service, it sounded more like a sewing machine, and now it sounds like a bike, which is fantastic. The only other things I've noticed are that the hinges of the fuel filler cap are a little bit rusty, and there's a little scratch near my exhaust pipe down there. So I'm gonna have to see those two things separately. But this is proof that if you look after Chinese built vehicles, especially these scooters, they will last you a long time. I've had no other issues with this, with the engine. The only other issue I had prior to this was the nail in front of a tyre, and even that you cannot blame on the build quality. Next service is at 2,000 kilometers. Happy days. A year ago I bought this. It was a 2023 brand new Znen Zongnen ZN 50 QT-11B, also known as the Leeway Sun 3. I've had it for just over 1,100 miles now, and I've now committed to owning it for another year. This is what it was like riding it for the first year. Hey, it's Pomerachard. So thank you very much for all of the positive comments and feedback on the video when I initially bought the bike. I did some follow-ups at 1,000 kilometers just after I had the first major service as well. Now it's been owned for a whole year, and there are a few differences that I've had with this. For example, it's had a lot more miles, and the majority, most of it, not much mechanically. It's exactly the same. There's nothing changed to it whatsoever, apart from this, which is the box. Bought it for £33 off eBay, and it's pretty good. I need it for additional storage, so if I want to put my helmet in here, it'll fit a helmet. If I want to put my gloves with my helmet, I can put my gloves on my helmet, among other things. I think it's a 32 litre box, but it's a pretty good one. It's got its own key and everything, and that's the only extra I've got at this moment. Riding the bike is pretty much as you'd expect after a year. I mean, there are some scuffs. I'll go into some little detail in a bit, but I know that if I haven't ridden the bike for about a week or so, I will rev it and it will just slow down and eventually come to a stop. It'll stall it, even though it's automatic, but it'll just stop. I don't know if that's something to do with the ignition or maybe a fuel supply issue, but recently, now I've been riding it a bit more often, it's getting back to its usual cheery self. So after a year, I've had no complaints with this bike whatsoever. Interestingly, because it's a Chinese bike, a lot of people have some issues with reliability and build quality. Not me. No, this has never been an issue. So I know that there have been some scuffs here. So for example, on the exhaust fairing, I dropped that. That was my own fault. Same with that as well. That was scuffed on my wall in my front garden. They're my own fault. Everything else, mechanically, absolutely fine. Hasn't missed a beat. And I've noticed this morning already there's been a bit of rust and discoloration in a few places, particularly near the brake mechanism. We've got some discoloration here on the indicator stalk. I don't know why that is. And there's little pieces of rust near the fuel filler, and we've got a spring there that's a bit rusty as well. I've been doing my best to keep on top of treating it. I have been putting it on a cover, and to be fair, it's doing mostly a good job, but when it's cheap and Chinese, you can't really moan. Everybody said anything about cheap and Chinese, oh, it's not reliable, it's not going to last you. This has not missed a beat mechanically. It's not fallen into bits, and everything electrical on it still works, just as it does from day one. All the lights are fine, the horn is fine, the ignition's fine, the kick spring mechanism is fine, everything that you'd expect from the bike, even the manual key slots. They're a little bit tense, but the point is they're absolutely fine. They work exactly how they did when I bought it, and it's done that for 1,100 miles. So I mean, to be fair, I don't expect anything less. I mean, things a little bit dirty as you'd expect it normally. It takes oil and fluids absolutely fine as well. Another thing I've noticed is that the brake lever is a little bit tense. especially when I'm trying to brake. The brake doesn't stick at all. The brake itself, absolutely fine. It's just the brake lever is a little bit funny. I might have to get that seen to, but that could just be because I'm doing it at a low speed. At a high speed, well, when I say high speed, it's 30 miles an hour, it's fine. Left brake, absolutely fine. Back brake, no problems. And everything else you'd expect with a bike is absolutely fine. Believe it or not, for this bike, I have had the minimal amount of maintenance required. Believe me, for both the services that I've had on this bike since I bought it and the front tyre that needed replacing last summer, I have spent a grand total of £226.23 for the whole year. That's not just on the essential repairs, that is the servicing as well, because if I didn't get the servicing done, my warranty would have been invalid. So it's a mind-boggling low amount of cash that I've had to spend. It's incredible. As for any four-stroke vehicle that is powered on two wheels, you are going to expect some very good fuel economy, especially for the lower engine sizes as well. Here is my fuel statistics since I've owned the bike. This amazingly includes MPG figures from as low as 92 miles per gallon to as high as 131 miles per gallon. And prior to this video today, the last time I filled the bike up was in January, but that might have also been because I haven't rode it as often. This is a bit of a double-edged sword. Because the bike's newer and therefore worth more money, it would be worth more to insure. But because it's not necessarily a vintage bike and therefore it can't necessarily go up in value in a short space of time, it's also cheap to insure. It's a bit of a weird one, but because it's 50cc, they're going to be cheap to insure regardless. Now, I had some troubles insuring the Zongneng ZN50 because it's not a bike that's recognised by a lot of insurers. You can insure a Leeway Sun 3, no problem at all. But for the first year of insurance, I paid just over £300 for the year, which I thought was extortionate. But this year's renewal came along and it was much, much, much cheaper. And to be fair, from what's being offered, the legal cover, the breakdown cover, it's a really good price. And I'm not just saying that because it's a 50cc and it's just dirt cheap. It is a really good price because A, it's just because it's a 50cc and it's low power anyway, so you shouldn't pay much on insurance for it. But because it is a new bike and it still retains value. That bike right now is still worth in excess of £1,000 considering its mileage and its condition. In terms of tax, this is no different at all from any other scooter. They're all £24 a year except if it's the electric scooter, which I didn't pay any tax. In terms of insurance, it is by far the most expensive bike I've ever owned. Some of the older bikes, specifically Gandhi 1 and Gandhi 2, have been known to be less than £100 a year, which is quite considerable, considering that the cubic capacity is exactly the same. Even though it was a two-stroke, and theoretically it could have gone faster as well, and it would have appreciated in value, if anything, was cheaper to insure. In terms of enjoyment to ride, though, this is pretty good. I mean, it's reliable because it's a four-stroke. The fact that it's a newer bike as well, it looks fresher, it looks more modern than some of the other bikes that I've had as well, also makes it feel better to ride as well. So I've had no issues with it. And to compare it with other bikes, dare I say it, it's a very bland personality for a bike, but it's one of the best I've ever ridden. And I genuinely mean that. Gandhi 1 and 2 come very close. It beats the Vespa because the Vespas are comically unreliable, and same with that hideous Aprilia that I had at one stage as well. But dare I say it, it's one of the best bikes I've ever had, and I mean that. When you get
a Chinese-made imported scooter, you have no expectations for reliability, for build quality, for what you're going to expect, especially if you've never bought a new bike before and if you've never bought anything that's not from a big player, so anybody who's an established brand, say Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, or even some of the Italian ones that look quite stylish but don't necessarily conform to the reliability standards. This is the best of both worlds, and I genuinely mean that hand on heart. If you're going to buy a brand new scooter, buy a Chinese one, because the people who you buy it from, they're going to give you the warranty anyway. They're going to give you that protection. They are going to give you the same levels of service as if you would from, let's say, a Honda or a Suzuki dealership for a bike. So you're looking good in those terms as well. I will give one ultimate piece of advice, and that is to go to a dealership and see these bikes in person. Because you get to build a relationship with the dealer. You get to see what the bike's like. What does it look like? What does it feel like? How does it ride? Don't buy it off the internet. Don't buy it off an online dealership, because I've heard so many horror stories of people buying, especially from direct bikes, that it scares a lot of people, and quite frankly, it puts people off from Chinese-made goods. But if you buy it in person, if you buy it from someone who's selling them, from a bricks and mortar shop instead of a warehouse, then you're on to a winner. And that, I would highly recommend you doing that experience. So that's all I've got to say. If you're going to buy Chinese, do it. But only if you're getting it from a dealership. Don't do it online, because you're taking a bigger risk. You're taking a risk buying Chinese, but it's paid off for me. And I would say that there are quite a few people who own Chinese-made bikes that aren't doing too bad for themselves either. So that's all I've got to say. That is my conclusion. All in all, a fantastic year of riding.
So that's my bike in full. It's been running perfectly for a year, mostly. I've had no quibble with this. For a new bike, for a cheap bike, for a Chinese-made bike known for its bad build quality, and for a bike with very little character for what it is, it's fantastic. And I'm looking forward to using it for another year. I mean, I've got ambitions. I mean, I've seen videos of people taking these small things halfway across the world. I mean, I would do that. If the money was there, I'd happily do this with no issue whatsoever. So what I'm going to do now, because it's going to rain in about 20 minutes time, I'm going to go home and keep myself in the dry. And as always, please leave a like and subscribe, leave a comment, and thanks for watching.